Okay, appears to be live. Might have to work on the lighting a little bit. I got my screen, but as you can see, it looks like I need to buy a second one to make it big enough. I had some other stuff I was going to use for background. I think I said this yesterday on the live, but right now this shoulder is AFU, and I don't have anybody around here to help me. But as soon as this thing heals up, or whatever the deal is, or bursitis, or whatever it is, I'll be able to move that drawer or better backdrop behind me. Uh, but everybody wanted. I hear a lot of people talking about 1-1 time and this Jeffro thing. I'm not going to get into the contention anymore. I already did that once. But um, I, as far as 1-1 time, if I looked at 1-1 time, the ratio 1-1, that would mean real time to me. And real time, who's going to do that? That's like uh, you're always at the game table or something. No, but you can divide a day or a week, whatever you prefer, into some sort of game turn where certain things occur. Um, like a war game term, and you can do that uh, throughout the say your gaming session is every Friday, like mine. Throughout the week, having communications with people where they do certain operations, uh, that would be a 1-for-1 time. Uh, and I don't think 1-for-1 is really the best way to describe it, because to me that sounds like real time, like every minute in real life that is expended is a minute in game turn or game time, and that would be difficult to do. But uh, you could have different phases of the day in a kind of turn sequence. That's what most war games would use. Uh, like early morning phase, afternoon phase, evening phase, late night phase, overnight phase, and have those phases uh, make up a number of hours throughout the 24-hour clock. What could you do within that period of time? Well, depending on the game, like if it was a war game where troops were marching around it, you would figure out how far troops can march in a period of time, say an hour, and then say, okay, so if you've got I say so too many times, I've been told, but if you got a 6 hour afternoon phase and your troops can move 3 kilometers per hour, you know, so they can move 18 kilometers in the afternoon phase marching, or maybe it takes 4 hours to build a bridge over a major river, whatever, something like that. But you come up with a list of possible actions to take for the players and the approximate amount of time an action would take. And then based on how you've chopped up the uh, the day or the week or the month or whatever you're using, you know, that just shows you how many things can be done in that period of time. So all those, and then when you have people everywhere around the world, like when you have a large campaign, that allows everything to be synchronized, so that you can, okay, if I'm marching in Tennessee, but you're marching in Pennsylvania, and it's the same game turn. Okay, well, how far did you go in the direction you were heading out of Pennsylvania towards Tennessee, and how far did the other guy go? You know, it's really something that would probably I'm probably not a great oral explainer. I might be better showing it to you. But I said this before. There's a guy named. Sorry, folks. I got to take a sip of something on this stream. I know some people find that but I got some nasal issues. So there's a guy on Twitter named Jim Arsowski. I hope I get his name right. The Gaskin is his screen name. I recommend you guys watch him or go to his YouTube channel and look at some of the uh, Kriegspiel games that he's done in the past, years past. Maybe I'll link some of that in the bio. Maybe I should have linked it in the bio. Maybe I can figure out how to do it. But that might be a good way to show you. But this kind of stuff can be done, and it's not a massive chore. Here, let me see if I can read for you from somebody that might be uh, slightly more articulate than I. Um, that's really all it is. It's if you've played any type of board game or war game, you'll you'll know kind of what I'm talking about as far as creating these things. Let's see, combat turns, player turn. Okay, player turns. At the start of each turn, both sides write their orders down and pass them over to an umpire. Right, or the GM if you don't like umpire. The umpire then deploys the units in the correct time. This allows both sides to effectively move simultaneously. So again, if you've got a horde of orcs that are moving towards your party from the woods or something, from some location, but your party's also moving at the same time, you know, these turns can allow that to all happen simultaneously. Um, it's a lot of it is like, is there anybody going to come to this thing? Nope. Um, this isn't going to make the whole thing sound attractive. So I don't know if it's the best way to describe it, but I'm going to try anyway. So don't let this ward you off. But if you remember math class, I presume they still do this in math class. The whole one train is heading east out of Akron, Ohio, and the other one's heading west out of Champaign, Illinois. If train A is going, so everybody hated those math. They called them word problems when I was a kid, because it wasn't. But that's just it. It's time, speed, distance calculations, and you don't have to do it during the game. Look, you just do this. You say, okay, cavalry is a horse. A horse will go faster than a dude. Well, how much faster? Well, go figure it out. Go. You don't have to guess it. I was talking about this too with a super wild ass guess or scientific wild ass guess, swag versus, well, I think a horse is pretty fast. They might go faster than a car, or they might go only 25. Just go look it up, man. It take you 5 seconds to go see what's the average trot speed of a horse, and then write that down. And dial it back a little bit from what the information says, because when you're a cavalry unit, you tend to move just a slightly bit slower because you have to maintain formations and stuff like that. And there you go. Now you've got your average for cavalry speed. So that's how fast a cavalry unit will go. Well, what about a dude? Same thing. You can look that up. How fast, if you're marching, there's a difference between walking and marching, and you can look it up, and it'll tell you. It's changed a little bit over the years because of the rhythm and the pacing and stuff, but it's fairly close. And you can look that up. And now you know how fast dudes on, just walking in a formation will go. Okay. But that's not the only information you need. Then you need to know what time span your turn is. 5 minutes, 5 hours, what? Okay. So at that rate of speed for that length of time, how far would you go? You don't have to do the math. There's calculators for that, specifically for that. All you do is you write in time, speed, distance calculator, and then all you got to do is put in the information. Say, uh, I'm going 3 miles an hour for 5 hours. How far have I gone? And it'll tell you. And then you just take that information you put it into like a table or however you like to arrange your information. Most people go for table, I think, and that'll show you how far you go per turn. Now, uh, your turn sequence again, 24 hours or a week or whatever. Now you have how much how many things can be done. And that goes for anything: building fortifications, getting formed up to march. How much time do you need to rest, to feed the horses, to feed your soldiers or your party, whichever, camping out, stuff like that. Everything can be given a time span um, for completion and then put inside those turn sequences. And that's all one for one time is. Now, I don't know if Jethro or those guys, they might, you don't know, you're not doing it right. Well, I disagree. Um, but that's really all that was. So if you're doing that in a modern situation, it could be as easy as texting the GM, once a day or once a week or whatever your decided upon cycle of sessions are, and keep track of what's going on for all those days or that week or whatever it is. And then when you sit down at the gaming table or the virtual gaming table, you get an update as to what's occurred over the period of the week that you weren't gaming. And in that sense, it's one for one time, in that every day elapsed or every week elapsed or whatever is somewhat accounted for, but not in the sense of we're spending every waking moment of our lives connected to a GM, sending him information, stuff like that. I don't know if that's what they mean, but that's not the way it ever was done. But it's if my rambling isn't that coherent, which I would might not be, just look up the word Kriegspiel. It's a German word that means war game, and the explanation for how that was played. I've got an article here, and again, if I was more of a veteran streamer, I would have known how to put that in my bio link or the description link below. But I'll get it out there somehow. But there's a ton of that sort of stuff. Hell, you can download those rules. Some of them are for sale as a game in themselves. Now, like I think it was Two Fat Lardies makes it, I think. So you can buy those things, or if you're cheap like me, you can find a PDF copy of the original and just kind of look through at what they were doing and see how that military game was just, people who are trying to be archaeologists about what Gary and Arneson and all these guys were doing. Just look at Kriegspiel and think to yourself, okay, how could I change what I'm reading into orcs and goblins and magic users versus line infantry and cavalry and artillery? It's not that big of a leap. And I mean, I'm not putting the guys down, but it's not some super secret difficult thing to uncode. So, and that's what the whole thing is. Now, as far as the toxicity that some people feel Brosser has or whatever, I don't. I just like to play old games, and I'd like to play them that way. I'm not as far as rules as written. Like I've put out in posts, there was enough poorly edited text in wargaming and role playing game in the 70s and 80s that if you play everything rules as written, you'll be confused. So what happened was people would either write into the company or into the magazine that the company was putting out, like Dragon or Avalon Hill General or SPI had moves, stuff like that, and they'd get some clarification from the designer. Or there'd be an addendum sheet that go, here's where we messed up. This line is supposed to say this, or change this rule with that, and like a patch on a piece of software. And that's how they clarified it out. And if you didn't get any addendums or clarifications, you just sat down with your friends and hammered it out till it made sense. So sometimes you'd go and play a game at somebody's house, and they'd play a completely different way than you because they read a confusing rule and came up with their own ideas on how to make it less confusing to them. And you and your friends did the same thing, but you might not have arrived at the same destination as far as a fix. So I don't see anybody being able to play rules as written unless rules as written are solid, and that's not that's a rarity in the 80s, so, or the 70s. Some are not all of them are bad, but some of them were bad. And frankly, Avalon Hill was notorious for horrible editing. Panzer Leader is a great, and Panzer Blitz are a great example of that. And you can see how bad it was edited by all the fixes that were made for it, all the add-ons, all the reskins, and there's sheets that guys made to clarify, how badly it was written. Sorry, Jim, but Dunnigan made a great game, and once you iron out the kinks in the wording, you've got a fun system to play if you're a war gamer. But if you're a noob reading that stuff, not so much. It can get very confusing. Right. Yeah, exactly, Drew. I mean, it was just right. And so when people come out and that know 1E and like 1E, but they know it, and then some guy like Jeffro says, "Well, you've got to every rule's got to be adhered to. Get out of there." No, you got to make your changes. So I don't ever see it being that kind of religious text type of approach to it. But I like the one for one concept. And I think that's very doable as long as it's done right. And in that part, I don't try to force it down people's throats or anything like that. But I tell you, it's like when you look at that dish of food and you go, "Oh, that doesn't look so good." But people are like, "Believe me, man, if you try that stuff, you'll be surprised." That's all I'm saying. Give it a taste. You might be surprised. But I'm not, I don't jump onto people's threads and say, you're a what's the word, infidel, because you don't follow the code or whatever it is. I'm not into that. But that's all it really is a war game turn that you do over the period of your spaced out session. And it really makes things great. You can have a more in-depth story because you can handle a lot of moving parts that aren't directly connected in an efficient way. That boy, this thing really is a mess. I can't keep this thing uncurled. But anyway, it's like got a life of its own. It just wants to become spaghetti. But yeah, it's great. You can do all sorts of things. I'm doing a West End Games, and the only reason I'm not doing one for one as much as I want to do is because I just couldn't get enough people to play it. West End Games Star Wars, that is. But if I could have got the 10 to 15 people that I was looking for, which is another thing, when people go, well, you can't handle any more than 4 or 5. If you do the one for one and you have people that are in constant communication with you over the period of a week, that's what I think a week is the best interval. But whatever works for you. But if you have constant communication, it's especially in this day and age with all the real time, like text messaging or email or whatever, it shouldn't be difficult to coordinate activities, especially if they're hammered out into a set of phases that you go through as like a turn sequence. Chainmail has turn sequence, as I recall. So it's something that isn't completely foreign to RPGs or people who are familiar with RPGs. So, but it could do all sorts of things. Yeah, I originally wanted to have Imperials, a group of players that were Imperials, and a group of players that were Rebels, and they all had different missions and different things going on. But there would be times when they would brush up against each other, or they would be actually, engaging one another in combat or something like that. And it wasn't going to be just in one planet or one system. I had them all over the place. Not a lot, but you know, 20 people, easy. And there's software for this now too. I'm surprised how few people that I talk to. Of course, I don't talk to a lot because I talk mostly on Twitter, and it kind of pigeonholes you into certain circles. But um, there's a lot of campaign software out there, and I have one that is perfect for doing one for one stuff. It's got all sorts of great features that can help coordinate and a large campaign, and having, you know, double digit players in the game is not an obstacle, as long as they're all willing to play, and as long as they're all willing to maintain regular contact. That's the key element. If they start going, oh, you know, I'm bored, or, you know, I didn't have the time to email you this week or whatever, then it'll start falling apart. But I always tell people this: I don't want to razz people for having responsibilities and families in life. That would be kind of a dick move. But I just say this. Sorry, I got this nasal thing. Um, if you write on social media a post once a week or once a day, then you can play one for one time and do the same thing and have it mean more, because it's part of a participation in a game versus just speaking out into the electric void to somebody who may or may not see you on Twitter or something like that. That's all you need to do, you know, and you'd have a very rich system. So that's pretty much one for one time. I wish I could show you stuff on it. You know, probably should open up the old screen share, but I don't have it. But anyway, I always like to talk to people, just generally chat. So I usually leave the thing open and see if people wander in and just want to, you know, chew the rag. So I'll do that. I'll just hang out for a couple of minutes and see if anybody's got anything else they want to talk about, or just say hi. Doesn't, and then we'll move on from there. Yeah, um, I do these off the fly. I probably should be more organized. I think people might be more uh, engaged if I had an actual script. But I just sometimes I see something, and I go, you know, I want to say something about that, and I think that maybe sometimes on the live I'll just get more people to see it, even if it's over a period of time, as opposed to tweeting about it where it might just get lost in the shuffle. So I'm at 23 minutes. I'll hold out to 25, make it a round number. If nobody else comes in or has anything to say, then I'll just shut it down. But sometimes, like the other day, I had a couple of people that came in, and we chewed the rag for a while, and I really enjoy the company because I live alone, and sometimes nice to talk. So we shall see. Of course, that was Sunday, and there we are. Oh yeah, yeah, right. And I want, this is another reason why I did it, because I saw, not to compete with them or ride on their back, but I just wanted to put my interpretation of one for one time out there, and then compare it to what Jeffro has to say. I get the feeling it's going to be significantly different, although he may be a much more articulated individual than I am. But a lot of people think it's just going to blow up into some crazy stuff. So we'll see. I'm not going to run out of cable tonight. I don't think so. I think I'll be able to make it. Sometimes the bills, but um, I'll be interested to see what his different saying about it is too. So I definitely don't agree with those guys on the rules as written stuff. But I do like the one for one time, as long as it's done right. But I don't know. I think it's going to be their idea of one for one is going to be different than me. So we'll have to see. But and then of course there's all the drama around it. So who knows what'll happen there? You know, somebody might come in and start trouble. Who knows? Hopefully not. Hopefully it'll be a clean debate. that will be interesting and engaging as opposed to some Jerry Springer, you know, flame war or whatever. But um, but the thing that I about all this that really gets me is it doesn't really get me. I'm not that sensitive, but I just kind of scratch my head and go, there's a lot of old people out there. There's a lot of guys that are, some of these guys are still around that played with Gygax, and I'm old enough. I started in '77, so why not ask instead of trying to be this uh, archaeologist about this stuff? And I see some people just, I don't know, maybe some people just prefer to piece the stuff together themselves. The discovery is an exploration and a joy in itself for some people, I suppose. So I shouldn't knock it too much. But I see them coming to these conclusions that are just slightly off. And maybe my OCD that wants to correct it. Um, but yeah, the next thing I'm going to do after this live is I'm going to invite everybody. I was talking to a fellow the other day, yesterday, I guess. And he says wargaming seems more appealing to me, and I think anybody who's interested in this old stuff, whether it be to play it or just to learn from it and what was going on, you should, just as an experience, sit down and play a war game, an old school war game, not something made 15 years ago or new or anything like that. Something that was made around the same time or prior uh, to chainmail or D&D. And if you played one of those, all the lights would go on instantly, and you'd see exactly the path that led Gygax and them from wargaming into D&D, and it would all make sense. But a lot of people don't want to do things. Go, I heard about those games. They're old and they're tired and they take forever and blah blah blah. Well, and they're overly complicated and all that. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But just as a intellectual exercise, playing one would be really beneficial to a lot of people that are interested in that sort of thing. So that's what I would. What I wanted to do is my next stream was going to just put out the invitation. Say, hey, if you've never done it, just do it. Right, right. Some of that stuff with they're all takes too long and all that sort of stuff. I don't know about that. I played lots of old squad leader and stuff back in the day, and then the next thing they say is, well, that was because you were 14 and you had all the time in the world. That's not really strictly true either. I get it though. I everybody has bills to pay and stuff like that. I don't want to be taking that away from people, but I think that if you really want to do it, you could prepare the game. There's a couple things you can do to mitigate it takes too long to play. I always saw a lot of people that would rag on a rule set because it took too long to play, but then they wouldn't factor in like chat around the table. I played a Panzer Leader game and it took all afternoon, but not because it was a slow playing system, because it was, three guys yucking it up and smoking cigarettes and, every 20 minutes and taking breaks and stuff like that. All of a sudden it turned into an afternoon event, but it wasn't the game system's fault. It was just, and we all had fun. It was an afternoon spent that was enjoyable for everybody. But then they go back and go, I played that game. It took me all day. Not if you put it set up the night before. Set the game up the night before. Make sure everybody knows what they're doing. Give them the scenario briefing, prior to game, so that when you show up at the table to play the game, you're all ready to start without any horsing around. And then keep the rhythm up. You can talk and have fun, but if you neglect the game while you're doing it, then of course it's going to take longer. Just little things like that. And then people would say, well, I hate looking at charts. Well, we always took the charts right to the local library or whatever and copied them out. on the old Xerox for a nickel a copy or whatever it was, and made sure everybody had that stuff in their hands so they didn't have to dig through a rule book, or they didn't have to walk around the table and say, hey, who put the combat resolution table under my sandwich or something? Yeah, right there. And then all you had to do is just go like that and you'd be ready. Just simple little things like that would expedite play. But and I've got software now that does it even more. Between Tabletop Simulator, Vassal, some other software I've got called Realmworks, and one called Birthier. I got all sorts of tools that make that kind of play go even faster, just with little computer assistance. And that's what I would like to do. I'd like to just get enough people to go, look, it's not going to be that bad. If you just sit down and do it, you might enjoy it, but at least at the very least you'd learn something about how it used to be. That's my next attempt. But beyond that is trying to get people to play all the games that I've got set up, which is like I got a lot and a whole menu of different games that I'm looking for people to play just to do something. If I can keep my financial head above water. So, but, and it doesn't have to be just Napoleonics either. That's the other thing. People go, well, I'm not into the historical stuff. That's all right. I could do Kriegspiel with Star Wars. I could do it with BattleTech. Really, that would be real fun. And any of that stuff, even stuff that has sensors. I played Harpoon games like that back in the 80s at Gen Con. Right. I'm still looking for people to play that, 4 to 5 people on the Dark Sun. And that could be done Kriegspiel wise. It would be fun to do it that way. Then you wouldn't know exactly where everybody is until you scout them out, or you get information or intelligence to know where the armies are. And so there could be surprise attacks and stuff like that. But yeah, that was one I've always wanted to play, and I've got that system can work with, like I said, 40K, BattleTech, Star Trek, Star Wars. I've got a ton of them. U.S. Civil War, Napoleonics. It's just a little something I threw together. I got all that from the first one I saw that really turned me on to that kind of gameplay where you have 2 levels. You have a strategic and a kind of a tactical, for lack of was Frank Chadwick's Combined Arms. It was it was about, World War III, NATO, Warsaw Pact in the 80s. And in the back, it had its own campaign. The northern part of Germany and Denmark being invaded by the Russians. And you had a hex map and a list of troops, and you copied the map and then put the copies under one of those plastic, so you could write on it, and you tracked where everything was. And then you used the war game rules to fight out the battles. So, and I go, that's neat. And I got tired of doing just North Egg. So then I started doing it with, I bought a Avalon Hill game called TAC Air. And I did the same thing with TAC Air. I just played the game until I hit a part where there was combat. Instead of rolling on the combat resolution table or any of that stuff, I just took all the chits that were involved and said, okay, that's 2 Russian BMP battalions and 1, Armored Cavalry Squadron or something like that, U.S. Armored Cavalry Squadron, for example. And I would just take those miniatures and put them out on the table and fight out the battle. And then I had a Tandy 600 laptop computer that had spreadsheets and database on them. So I would use the spreadsheets to track casualties. So I'd have the unit number that was on the chit that was given to the game. I have that in the spreadsheet, and then I have how many tanks and how many men and all that were in it based on reference material that I had about about those things from different games like Combined Arms and different miniature games. So I'd write that stuff out, and then I'd track the casualties down to the man. So every time that unit fought and it lost, its losses were reflected in the next battle. And I did that with board games all the time. Anytime I could get people to do it, I did it a lot solo because a lot of people were like, "Wow, that would take forever." So, and on my Twitter page, if you go back far enough, you'll see a lot of that where I showed people that on Twitter using Vassal. I did it with more modern games like GMT's War Games and Panzer Leader and stuff like that. In fact, I was doing one back in June and I kind of lost track of it because life got in the way. But I might finish that one up, and I wanted to do a Kursk one too. But I love that multi-tier system, and that's the kind of thing that works great with Kriegspiel. And that Gaskin guy I was talking about, he does the same thing, but he does it with Napoleonics. He's got a map up on a wall, and he shows where all the armies are, and he points to it with this little pointer like a general, and then he goes and he fights out the battles on the tabletop. It's really fun to do because it gives you some context instead of just, oh, here you are in the midst of some battle where everybody else has made the decisions to get you to where you are. Instead, it's all a continuing narrative. You make all the decisions, and everything happens based on what you decide to do and where you put your people. And then you get instant scenarios made out of it contextually, and it works for anything. It's fantasy, sci-fi, whatever. You can do it with all that stuff, like Dark Sun. That's the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. I got some people to actually do that with me as a service. I did a GM service the other day. I got made some money doing that. People were interested and they played because it can get a little work intensive to do. So I figured my labor was worth something, and so did they, thankfully. So they paid me. But that was kind of the side hustle I want to do is have all these games set up so people could come in and just play them. With they could learn the system if they didn't know it, you know, but they wouldn't have to buy everything or anything like that. They could just log in, sit down, start making decisions for their play, and not have to worry about looking up charts or reading reference material or anything like that. I would have all that for them supplied so that they wouldn't need to learn it all. It would just be the one system I have will actually put it right in front of your face on your screen. When you can download a little package and it'll show everything right on your computer, like FTP. So I would love to find one that does it real time. I haven't found that yet. Some people say you could do it with Discord, which I suppose you could. But I got some people that go Discord's a little too chaotic, but you could do it with Discord technically. And I use that kind of stuff, but they'd be gigantic games. I got a squad. If you know Squad Leader, I got a Squad Leader game like that. But I need a lot of people to play. A lot. There's it's an attack on the forts around Metz. I read a book about the fighting around Metz, and I was fascinated by it. It really did a number. Anyway, so people that know Squad Leader, and of course, if you know Squad Leader, you go, oh, shit, any game, and Squad Leader takes forever. Well, computer assistance is really the way to go. And somebody wrote a computer assist program for Squad Leader that does all the combat calculations for you. And if you use that, boy, you slice a big fat chunk of time off of playing those games. It really speeds things up. So I have that program, and that's how I would do it, so it wouldn't be so slow, even though there's a lot of forces out there. But it would have to be done in one for one time. There's no way that I could, I don't think I get enough people to. I think Discord might not even be able to Well, maybe it could. I don't know how many people you can get at one time on voice. I mean, theoretically, probably as many as you want, but realistically, with connections and bandwidth, at some point it would probably collapse. But if you did it one for one time, it would be easy. You give your troops the orders. Me and my program uh, crunches all the numbers, makes all the adjustments. The next time you come back, you see the results, and you just do that until the game's over. It would be great fun, but it's like bowling league. So, so what are you going to do with the? So the Dark Sun gave you inspiration. What are you going to do with that? If you don't mind sharing it, what's your idea? Just curious. I always forget that I talk about myself too much. I also forget that there's about a 7-second delay between what I say and when I say something and when somebody hears it. So I can't remember. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. It's all very fun, and I see it working a lot better with wargaming, frankly, unless you're playing something. I mean, I see its utility in 1E and stuff like that to some degree, but maybe it's just my lack of imagination. But and I started wargaming before I started RPG, so I kind of maybe look in that direction. But to me, having large units of troops moving around in different places and keeping track of them is the best way to do that. But I've seen it done in other things. I remember a great big dungeon crawl where it worked really well. Yeah, right. Cool. Yeah, yeah. I remember there was a dungeon crawl. I don't know if in at Gen Con, one year in the '80s, and they had like 50 guys, whatever, 50 uh, characters in a dungeon or something like that, some giant thing, and there's a lot of people involved in that, and but they did it the same way. They didn't do it over the days; they did it over 2.5 hour gaming sessions. Yeah, um, I battle system. A lot of people say chainmail's got the better rule set, and they may be right. But I remember opening that big battle system box and all the options and all uh, the different races, and uh, it even had the 2 dimensional terrain, and or like I don't know if they were where they were like you had to put them together and then they became 3 dimensional, but they were just made out of different sheets, like you folded them together, or whatever, something like that. And then you had the little chits that were top down, like it was an ogre with a or a troll with a rock, and you were looking at them top down, and they were little units. I just love all those features in that box set for Battle System, and I had a lot of fun just setting up games and playing it. But I hear a lot of people going, chainmail is just the quicker and easier, and it may be. But um, the same guy was talking about, that Gaskin guy. He did a couple of battle system games too. He did them on Tabletop Simulator and then streamed them. It was pretty neat. And he used all sorts of different miniatures on tabletop, which is virtual. But but yeah, there's I used to use what was it called, War Machine or whatever. What was it on BECME? War Machine, I think it was. We used to have big fights with that, using the rules to construct fortresses and stuff like that. Yeah, pretty good. It was one of those things where they picked different games for variety, and not all of them knew how to play, and the ones that did hadn't done so in like a decade or more. So there's a little bit of trouble getting them remembering things and kind of ironing things out as you play. But in general, it seemed to be okay. But I think chainmail is just a quicker and faster one because it's less complex and it's easy to pick up and stuff like that. But I love. I was a big fan of Crunchy at that time period. I had like games like Challenger 2 for wargaming. I don't know if you're familiar, made by the War Games Research Group or something. I like games that had all sorts of options, like everything was covered or as much as possible. Like Phoenix Command, the combat system for role playing game. I loved that. I wanted to play it. I couldn't get anybody to play it though. I'd hand them the book and they'd go, "Hell no, I'm not doing that. That's crazy." And it was way much, but I loved all that stuff. It was fascinating to see all those options. So I had to dial it back to get people to play with me though. But I think I did all right. I played a lot of Battle System on my own. I think it moved along okay, but Chainmail certainly faster. So um, I never played a lot of Swords and Spells or whatever that one was. So I don't know how well that one plays versus Chainmail, but yeah, the first thing you get out of people with those kind of games is, "Oh, we'll never finish it if we play a battle for every army on the thing or whatever." No, maybe not. One of the things we did is if it was too big of a project and it was obvious that you'd never be able to fight every battle out, we oh, excuse me, I have to take this call. Pardon me. Have a good time. Sorry to cut out fast on you. Gotta go.